So God's rest is to rest in man. What did I say? God's rest is to rest in man. So later on, God is now yearning and asking, where is the place of my rest? Or what is the place of my rest? That's because he had not rested. That seventh day was a preparation, was a gift, was something prepared where God and man will eternally fuse together. That didn't happen. Why? Because the man rejected the tree of life. Because the man did not receive what God was offering in the tree of life. God offered the tree of life, which again is God's handiwork. God says, man, receive the tree of life will be the life powering force of the man. Receive this. And if you receive this, how you will live will be by this life. That means you will not live by yourself. Again, he that has entered his rest has ceased from his works. Hebrews 4 verse 10. And then in the same instance, as the man enters into God's rest and he finds the life of God there and depends on the life of God to live his life, in that same time, God finds his own final dwelling place. So it's a two-in-one activity where man comes into what God has finished and is using all of God's resources to live, God's life to live. At the same time, God comes to rest and God finds a dwelling place and settles there. Why does God need a resting place? Because that's the purpose of everything. The purpose of the entire creation. Why does God need to rest in the man? Was he not resting where he was before? Well, we don't know what he was doing, but we know that the moment he began creation, the final purpose of everything he was creating was so that he could be in the earth physically through a man. So man in God's image is God in a man. So God in a man is God's image. God in a man is God dwelling and resting in man. So why does God need to rest in man? That's why he created everything. If he didn't rest in man, he probably would not have needed to create anything. So when he made everything he made, so that the man can be comfortable, the height of the man's activity will be to possess God, to carry God, and God will now be seen in physical form. So whenever we see the man that carries the Spirit of God, we see that man is the image of God. Not a physical person as in male, female, but the agency of the image of God is the Spirit of God on the inside of the man. So if a man carries the Spirit of God in that man is the image of God. That's why God created everything. And that's why God wanted to rest in man altogether. But when the man rejected the tree of life, the same way there were two desires, none of the desires were met. Because the rejection of the tree of life first indicated man's choice of dependence on himself. That is, when the man rejected the tree of life, like I explained to you just now, God desired the tree of life to be how man will live. The tree of life is not really a tree. It's just the source of life. The source of life is the Spirit of God in extension. If you're a member of this church, you should know what that means. So, basically, when man rejected the tree of life was how man should live. So man rejected God's gift of rest. That is the chance for God to live through him, and especially the chance for him not to have to prove himself to God through his actions. The chance of self-righteousness. That is, that I would have to do something. I would have to work, and through my works, I will earn God's merit. What God wanted was that you just take what I'm giving you. You live by me, and I will be your justification. I'll be your righteousness. If you live through me, you won't need to use your own actions to justify yourself before me. So when man rejected the tree of life, he rejected the rest of God. That is the chance to live by God. What that meant was now that man will now need to prove himself to God. Man will now need to depend on himself. Man will now need to be perfect in conduct. Man will now need to try to attain righteousness by his works. So this kind of process, this activity is strenuous on the man. That is, you have to work. It's now called works to prove yourself to God. That itself is energy draining. Now, by extension, the man cannot rest. Are you seeing that now? He cannot rest. Why? Because he is trying hard to prove himself, not just to God, but to prove that he merits everything that God gives him. And every good thing that comes to his life, he has worked hard for it. So, if he works, he's putting the pressure on himself. Therefore, he is not resting. So, he is laboring. In other words, he is not resting. He is putting in human effort, his own works, to attain righteousness. So when the man rejected the chance to receive the tree of life, to live by God, he was sentencing himself to a lifetime of labor. So man did not